Good. So we are live here on internet, on Instagram, and we are live. I think. Yes, I think so. Ah, nice. Well, it is a little bit different for the camera. All right, guys. So we're live. Uh, Thank you for coming over. Hello, Mr. Sugoma Goma. Can you tell me your name because I cannot remember just by the login. uh, Let me close this up because maybe someone is writing also on YouTube. We're live in both. So remember, people, we are at the Q&A here from A-létheia, the Speak Up Club. I'm gonna have to ask help here. The air will be nice, thank you. And I think there's someone at the door. Okay, so let's begin, people. Tonight, as you could see by the title, this is about a Q&A about One Piece and other awesome stories. 2 weeks ago, we had the first Q&A based on the topic. Um, we covered mostly back then everything about One Piece in terms from the perspective of the way we saw One Piece, how we compare One Piece to certain things about reality, and we used the principles, especially for example, speaking about values and sorry, I got I got spewed on my face. Thank you. Uh, what was I saying? About how the story gets into by the use of metaphor into making a quirky analysis to our real lives in this world, and it's great. And I confess back then that how One Piece was a story that I would use if I had a kid to teach values because it's the best one. I mean, it will grow definitely with my kid. And as I have been reading One Piece for so many years, and we all know that One Piece has been long for over 25. So yeah, definitely, I could use One Piece over and over as that story. I will read my kids to at night for them to sleep. That'll be cool. But of course, we started discussing other different stories apart from One Piece, and I kind of left the door open, wide open, regarding the media I get access to, as reading online is definitely a hobby I have. I read whatever I have the chance. I obviously don't really read comics. I read mostly articles because when it comes to books, to be honest, I confess that I haven't been reading any prose in the last 2 years, possibly. And no, actually, I read some stuff in prose with my wife. Now that I remember, but not much. I'm not into prose that much. I'm more into, for example, articles, news generally, but not just simply okay, this happened, this other thing happened, and our vision is this one and that. I read, news that try to see the situation from a wider perspective, and understanding that I obviously have to exercise my own criterion when I get to understand what news are. And we all know that information is dealt without the consideration of the person that is listening. Information is dealt obviously with a purpose, and the purpose is to fit on the benefit of whomever is paying for that information to be out there. Okay, so we all know, we all think, or sometimes even give for granted that we're supposed to get to be informed about whatever is happening in the world. And How? I mean, that's a privilege in itself. The capacity of receiving information that is 100% truth, uh, proven, cleared, etc. I mean, how? How can you actually approve, not approve, sorry, how can you actually grant that the information that you get out there is not necessarily um, with, let's say, made on a purpose, and the purpose is obviously to make the people behind that look good, because of course they're not gonna make bad publicity to themselves, even though of course there's this principle that bad publicity is good publicity as well, but that's not the case. So going back to the stories, long round, we are going to be speaking about other stories, because um, we made a little bit of an introduction. Three stories that we discussed last week. Um, they were interesting and they were mostly fresh. None of them are finished. And in reality, sometimes that happens to be a little bit of a cruelty of reading comics. The fact that sometimes you get to find such great stories and they're not finished. So you read something that just leaves you dreaming for a while till you get to read something different while you're waiting for an update. Sometimes the update never comes. That's terrible, and it has happened. Being stories that end up being indefinite hiatus, and it's suffering. Sometimes some of those stories they make a comeback, but then it's been so long that you kind of like fall out apart though from that type of relationship you have with the story from the beginning. You really need to have an excuse to go back to it. Like in my case, it has happened with many classics. There is this one that they had an anime running for quite a while, and I really had my expectations that it was supposed to become a great um, shonen story, a la One Piece, My Hero Academy, and Kaisen. Though Jujutsu Kaisen is a little bit more seinen than shonen. I mean, for shonen Jump material. For those people that know about what I'm speaking about, is that shonen Jump material is supposed to be things that are for kids, meant for kids, in terms of, yeah, it's true. In most of these type of comics, I'm speaking about manga, manhwa, webtoon, and of course, manga, manhwa, webtoon, and and action comics. They are full of action, which is another way to say they have a lot of violence. They depict a lot of violent scenes, and the level in which the violence is supposed to be depicted will definitely affect on how the classification of that comic is. So of course, the rougher the looks, the higher the classification. It's not supposed to be for kids if you see gore in such level. You always see a little bit of gore in comics. I remember when I was a kid, Tom and Jerry was one of those cartoons that I used to grow up watching when my parents were not home, or came late from work, and I had to basically, just wait. And Tom and Jerry was really fun to watch. And my dad called me a couple times, and hey, what you watching? Tom and Jerry, Dad, it's very funny. Come watch with me. And he started saying, "Oh my God, this cat is being roasted, chopped in pieces, grilled. exploded in many ways, and still, this guy, this comic is quite violent, and that's what my dad said back then. But then he chuckled. He couldn't help to, because the comedy, it was all purely physical comedy back then, for Tom and Jerry, was great. So you could justify all the violence of Tom and Jerry for the fun it gave you. And there's been so many different studies I'm not really quoting tonight that plays basically the idea that if you enjoy to watch stuff like gruesome sometimes, like, little bit of violence, gore, and stuff that is supposed to, be contradictory to a peaceful life, from afar, from the perspective of fantasy, you get to purge certain type of negativity that you have within you. And that's not the same as watching the news. When you watch the news, you get stressed out because you realize that reality is even worse. When you read this in comics or any type of media, at the end, you enjoy the process of seeing something gruesome, because it helps you purge. Sometimes it helps you purge negativity. The best stories make you purge quite a lot. And there's a lot of things to learn from comics in reality. People don't know that in reality comics are, they're undermined, and the type of content that you get to receive from comics, they're all totally undermined just simply by the banner of being considered render a comic, that something that is not supposed to be serious. And lots of writers, good writers, have gravitated to making comics because they realize that in comics they have the capacity of expanding in ways that possibly in prose of any kind would not really be possible. Or, this is totally proven in movies, for example. It will not be possible to make so many different movies because of the type of effect, the perspective proposed by many of these comics will be very impossible to be reproduced in live action films. And we all know the many different failures of the attempts of making, live action films of comics, coming from wherever they come. Like, for instance, I watched only the first Attack on Titan live action. Ah, it was gruesome, and not because of how violent it was. It was gruesome because how it chopped awfully the story and made everything so convoluted afterwards. It was crazy. Anyway, I watched one of the movies of another story that I mentioned last week. That is, um, a Full Metal Alchemist. You see, the problem with, for example, specifically manga to anime, the way it translates is perfect, because you could see that it's simply just giving color to whatever is being portrayed in manga. So of course, now that with coming the new attempts in from Webtoon, making their stories into anime, it also doesn't really have any problem in the form of adaptation, besides just simply, technicisms. I loved the first season of Tower of God, and I've been reading Tower of God for quite a lot, though I'm not updated to the last, let's say, 60 chapters. I think I'm no, no. Uh, I'm only like about 30 chapters behind. And I really like this story. It's a little complex and slow burn, but what you watch, if you watched the anime in the first season, is really, really just the beginning. This is a long story. For those of us that like long, complex stories, It's actually really interesting. But sometimes the author make us suffer along the way. You need to have patience when it comes to stories like this, because this one particularly is a little bit old fashioned. Manwha have, let's say, evolved in the last 5 years because of so much influence right now that you have in sites like Webtoons. I keep on mentioning so much that you have seen authors that have worked on different stories originally for their, let's say, their national modality of publication. That if it was Korean, it was manga. If it was Chinese, some type of manhwa pronunciation. I'm sorry if I don't say it in the correct way for the guys that are the purists. Please bear with me. Okay. So the same with other different titles from other different places. But of course, Webtoon opened the area for not just simply the Koreans and not just simply the Chinese, but also many, many other people. The other day, I found one from that's perfect. The looks of it, just the graphics are simply just beautiful art. And the story is interesting so far. The first 5 chapters I read. This one is from Barbados. Barbados. Okay. And the name of the story is Ordeal. Interesting. Anyway, let's begin. I'm not going to be showing graphics. I will be simply just mentioning names. And the Q&A is open, you guys. Whenever you begin with questions, obviously I will start answering directly. I needed to make the introduction, of course, for you guys to know basically what we are discussing tonight. So, any question? Let's begin. Again, I was saying I'm not gonna be showing any graphics because I still am not 100%. Let's say full of. How can I say this? I haven't really mastered my skills when it comes to using certain type of tools. I'm new, definitely. I must say that I'm a new, and as a new, I must consider that I have to, let's say, sometimes be more flexible, but that's kind of difficult sometimes because of my age, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to deny that, but anyways, I promise that in our future lives, some of the looks that we have will change a little. I'm learning. Okay, we are learning here. And we're gonna try to see if we can incorporate some images along the way, and if we are mentioning examples regarding what we're talking about. Okay, so um, what I was planning to show you guys. Okay, not show you, discuss. I'm gonna need to enter into a little bit of okay. Checking on a directory that I use specifically when I need to make recommendations. It's kind of difficult to find places that have like everything. You know what I mean by everything is a good deal of old plus new. You have places all over the place, all over internet that are 100% dedicated to simply just what's new. And in reality, because of the updates, they don't have more than 1,000 titles. And you probably say, what, 1,000? Yeah, 1,000 is not like really that much. And I'm really just putting that name out, that number out of my ass. Sorry, but it's true. However, it's kind of like to tell you that in reality the number is huge just because there's so much right now online. Okay, and it keeps being accumulated. Like every year, there's new stories that people are writing, and new people that are adding their own stories to the fray. and you can see that because of this, the competition has made authors becoming homogenized somehow. Sometimes you see that there is a trend on a particular type of story. Like, for example, those of you that are the connoisseurs, you can tell you have isekai. Well, you have isekai plus, and from there you go, I don't know, horror. And if it is horror, you go, oh, zombie or vampire or ghost or yokai if it's Japanese, or spirits if it's from whomever or wherever. Sorry. And you know what I mean? You go all the other way from different number of genres that right now they just basically like clicks, um, options that allow you to do the searching of whatever you want to read. So you could simply spend all your life reading if you wanted to, just by clicking on every one of the titles that are available there. But again, some web pages are BS because of the type of information they have. It's only just going on, kind of like what Spotify does, you know. Getting the biggest numbers, and only by the biggest numbers they run their show. They just simply display the bunch of different titles that are just simply the top of a green, but they don't have any substance in terms of classics. And we all know that not every story becomes a classic. So yeah, it's true that we have to honor our olds, yeah, our elders, and because it's, if it wasn't for them, we couldn't really find some of the really good stories. They are the ones that they trace, or they make a trend for us to, for them, these other creators to follow. So let's say today, let's make a search out between one and the other. The directory I'm using is the one from mangahub.io. This web page is awful. I'm sorry, but it's true. It's awful because it has so many different pop-ups that it's just knows if you have to have a lot of patience. However, the directory it has is, I haven't found until now one other web page that will allow you to do the searching that you want to, in case you are interested in reading. So if I go there, obviously we'll look for A to C selection, because that way I can find the combination of old and new. So obviously they begin by all genres. And when you have that, you realize that the very first ones that they sent are ones that you possibly think that you've never read. And the reason for this is there is a huge market of stories that possibly here in this part of the world we don't know anything about. When we're speaking about fantasy, it so happens that people indulge themselves into stuff, the types of stories that, let's say, they possibly will not share that they are reading. And I'm not saying that like the history of pornography, you know, that people watch pornography behind other people's backs, and they will never confess that they watch pornography, or a type of pornography. I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about um, something that is even weirder than the pornography. I'm speaking about reading taste, and reading taste is weirder because you got so much when it comes to comics. The very first thing that you see is really pink, just to say the least. And what I mean by pink is you got from romantic to lolly looking stuff to also LGTB, different kinds, to let's see, one more. It's so pink. I'm really sorry. There's a lot of what you call fan service, and the fan service is something that has always moved the industry of comics, because We have to acknowledge the fact that, at least in Japan, the comic book history, sorry, the comic book industry was controlled mainly by the mafia, as you know them as the yakuza. Sorry, but that's how it's how the story actually says that it happened. Lately, today, you can see that it has branched out, and not only Yakuza are in charge of owning comic book companies. So lots of people that have invested in the area of comic book have saved the environment. But you have a trend that already exists that has lots of people hanging, and that is basically this type of trend, the super pink type of one. So of course, I understand that if you just simply watch the first the first page, you possibly get shocked in the wrong way, because you probably say like, this is something that is not really gonna help my mind. And well, of course, I'm not putting down your taste. Maybe you will find all of this interesting, cool from the get go. But if it is my thing, and as I was the one who was explaining this to you guys, I will basically go for just not this. Oh, we got the first person, Mr. Pedro. Hello, Chainsaw Man. Man, okay, we began with the first one, Chainsaw Man. Coming back from classics, we have to speak about classics. Chainsaw Man is becoming that. I have read not only from the same author, Chainsaw Man, Chainsaw Man. I have read also Fire Punch, and I read also another pilot, just a little bit. This author is great. It's awesome. It's got depth in the way he handles, or she, I don't know if it is a he or she, then that is a Japanese name, of course, and I don't remember right now. Um, but the way this person handles the characters, the depth in which the story takes place, is because how ignorant the main characters are of everything that's happening around them. And the story is a story in which they have a protagonist, but it's not that they are supposed to, you know, conquer things. In reality, it's just simply we following stuff that happens to this person. And it's so depressing, but it's great at the same time, because, it takes lots of imagination and creativity and order to keep a story going that way. I dropped it though. I didn't finish because it was really depressing. And if I have to read stuff for a long time, I don't like stuff that makes me really depressed. I need to take times. I go back with time from time to time. I read it and I wait months and I come back to them and I read months afterwards. I don't really go through that fast. That's what happens for me. For example, with uh, Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga is another classic. It's a story that people are right now waiting for the second season in Instagram. Sorry, people. In Netflix. On Netflix, sorry. On Netflix, there was the first season, and the first season was up until the very first part of the life of the protagonist. Uh, what's the name of the protagonist? Thorfinn. And spoilers alert, what comes right after is so sad, is so depressing, that you really have to arm yourself with patience to get till the end. And even when you get till the end, the consequences are so half standish. They don't really resolve things. They just leave you with uh, an, a sensation of anxiety for what's to come, because you know that the whole situation of the protagonist is a transition situation. that it keeps developing as a transition of a transition of a transition up until the end. I still don't know. Caught up to once Thorfinn decides to join the war. I don't know how he gonna join the war because he's not supposed to hold weapons. And then there's this lady that is coming with him. I keep forgetting her name. That will decide to kill him if he decides to actually use a weapon to hurt the person, no matter if it is on his own defense. So, interesting. That's what's happening there. Going back to Chainsaw Man, the story is great just for the fact that it expands on the capacity of a, a person using reality based on imagination. See what I mean? I could say that an inspiration, of course, to Chainsaw Man is obviously the series of the movie series of Nightmare on Elm Street. That is basically where the character of Freddy Krueger became famous. And Freddy Krueger, as you all know, was that character that was capable of hunting you from your nightmares, from your dreams. And of course, how can you avoid dreaming if you need to go to sleep every day, right? At the end of the day. And how bad it was, you could tell when the protagonist, all the main crew, had to basically, do or go to the extremes to stay awake. That was the part of those movies that was the most horrific. Everything else became a cliche with, the following movie after the following movie. I don't know how many of those movies came to be, but everything that basically happened in the movie that happens to be about how horror really works is because it sinks in your imagination. And it says that if your imagination is wild, then reality can be that wild too. And things will go as bad as you can actually think they will be. And if you convince yourself from that, well, you will go for the most horrific trip of your lives. So, yeah, that's simply how it works. And we all know that the school of horror, at least in Japan, is big. You have the Hito stories. What's the name? Shinji Hito. That's a classic, also. The one creator of Uzumaki, the one creator of oh, I forget right now some of the stories. I read Uzumaki. I think that was the last from Mr. Hito. I don't remember his name right off out of the way. But let's go back to Chainsaw Man because I'm diverting too much. The case of Chainsaw Man, uh, it uses part of the same logic that Freddy Krueger uses. I mean, the fact that each one of the characters, and I don't know if you have read you're up to date, and I'm really sorry if I'm gonna spoil you, so spoilers. Got up to chapter 100, I think. There is, I think, that 12 more chapters right now, but I haven't read them. I don't have enough time. I would love to. Um, the logic behind each one of the characters of Chainsaw Man is that their imagination and the way they resonate with the fear they produce on whomever that they work against is what makes them powerful. So, of course, if you are the type of demon in that type of world, if you're the type of demon that kills people by licking them, that is not gonna really make people that afraid as opposed to a demon that produces chainsaws. I mean, you can still be killed with licks, tongue licks, I guess. But if you are killed by sharp, horrendous looking chainsaw, that's scary. Nobody really likes that. It's supposed to be something that's painful. So, of course, just by that logic, you realize that Chainsaw Man is another overpowered type of hero, and it's so dumb. The poor kid, so dumb that everything that happens around this kid makes the story awesome. Not him, not the main character. Things happen to the main character. He doesn't happen to things. He doesn't really have much agency on the actions around him. He takes choices that are given to him that you as the audience can see from way afar and realize, oh well, good luck, my friend. And we all know that there is like no safe other character in the story. You cannot really fall in love with anyone, and that makes the story valid in a way because it takes balls for any author to kill the really important characters too and keep the story progressing. And at the same time, possibly that's the reason why I decided to stop on Chainsaw Man because I was a little bit tired of seeing so many good characters die and not appearing again. But I really like it. It's just that at the end, it's a little bit sad. You see, look, really good stories, Pedro, are sad, and it requires some patience to read sad stories. Now, when you are young, when you are really full of energy, it's great to read sad stories because that give you depth as a person. That you don't need to suffer stuff on your own to really know how life is difficult. Okay, it's good that you really investigate on your own by asking around, by talking to other people, and realize, okay, life is difficult. If that life is difficult for them, well, what do I learn from what they tell me? How did they see things? How did they live things, etc., etc. At my age, not that old, but I'm old. I much more interested in the opposite, in the capacity of breaking through stuff. I read so much about stuff, sad stuff, when I was a kid, when I was younger. When I was about 16 years old, I remember that I started reading, no, I think I wasn't 16, I was 15 possibly. I started reading Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment was a heavy book, sad book, crazy, but full of energy and full of learning lessons. And I spent about 3 months to finish it because it was heavy, difficult for me to read, especially with the tendency of the author, using the three names of every character every time the character appeared. You had to read the three names all the time, and sometimes four plus the nickname. Mr. Raskolnikov Romanov. Anyway, I forgot the full thing. Going back to Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man, great story. Sad though. It's sad. But great story. And specifically for people your age, Pedro, some of the best things I have to say. Coming from Japan. Now, from the same perspective of a sad but great, coming from Japan, classic, I would recommend a story that is as good, and that will be Vagabond. So please, people, take note. Vagabond. What is Vagabond about? The Vagabond is a story, one of the many, of course, stories of or attempts of the adaptation of the life of Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto Musashi was a classic samurai from the obviously we're speaking about feudal years of Japan, and this guy was founder of different martial arts schools, and he had to deal with the six rings that are used for the Olympic Games. About a book that he wrote related to the art of war, and so many different other historic references. We know that this guy, even though his profession was killing people, was exemplary for a full nation. And of course, that had to be used as an inspiration for any story. I mean, come on. a person that kills quite a lot of people and teaches you about the value of life in the process, is definitely manga worthy. And of course, that was done with the case of the story. The name is called Vagabond. I strongly recommend you to read this story if you are over 16, because under 16, you will not really understand it. Over 16, you will be capable of having the stomach to get to see some gruesome stuff, because in reality, this story begins with gruesome stuff. There is a fight scene in which literal human feces are involved. So, terrible. Yeah, but yes, I strongly recommend you reading about this story, because the protagonist is as stupid as dumb as the one in Jason Man. However, there is a difference. In Jason Man, you realize that Kenji, I think is the protagonist's name, begins to yearn for a change along the way of his losing stuff. In the case of the protagonist of Vagabond, Takeso, he begins to, no, he begins firstly by having a search out of something, and then he finds despair because of the lack of recognition. And that despair is a really strange trip. It's a really strange trip because people don't really get young people when they go through difficult situations. Sometimes we know there is a friend of us that cannot deal with emotions such as anger and frustration. Some young people become this little bit violent, but they cannot really help it. And the reason for this is simply because the situation that is related to not being capable of making themselves be understood. And specifically among men is sometimes part of male toxicity, I believe, that we don't really understand that we are full of these type of little frustrations, and we need to find ways to let this frustration go somehow. Possibly that's the reason why we like this type of stories. Mr. Ayman is here. Mr. Thank you for coming. Awesome. Awesome. Hi, Mr. What do you think about solo leveling? Another popular Korea's notorious stories from Korea, of course. Well, last week I recommended some Korean already. And yes, you remember I was mentioning at the beginning of the story that classics are those stories that become trends themselves, and from them, other stories are reoriented. Like they make a phrase or a trend that other stories simply just follow. Solo leveling was that, was the, let's say they laid the base for what new adventure stories were supposed to be. Even the ones that are related to, let's say, superheroes or adventurers. Those two things are combined in solo leveling, and obviously the video game. Because if you consider the idea of a video game applying to reality, there, there were other stories before that. You got, for instance, the moon, the half moon sculptor. That was one. There was another one that was fated to be great. That was the other translation name. And there was another one that was before this. Yes, The Gamer. Yeah, I was reading The Gamer. The Gamer is a classic. As long is it goes back, if, possibly as long as Tower of God. Okay, you guys have that one. And The Gamer, there was a time that was really awesome, but then again, the type of storytelling method that they use in The Gamer can make you lose focus for a little, because it gets too wordy and too strange to, let's say, for you to figure out the type of word set that they try to make, like just before they get to the main conflict, that it might lose you. Such was a little bit the case of solo leveling, because you realize that, okay, if you have a character that easily gets overpowered, so easily gets overpowered that soon, you think that, well, there must be a higher purpose for this, such is the case of what's happening right now with One Punch Man. Um, the purpose is, okay, he's preparing for something that goes beyond. When that happens, you realize that, okay, there was a need for you to come with a story that would allow you to put everything together about the world that you know and the world that they don't show you around that much. But you realize that either the author ran out of ideas or simply just was rushed, because you could not really get anything from the other world. For example, spoilers alert. Sorry, Iman, if you read Solo Leveling. So if you haven't finished Solo Leveling, but in Solo Leveling, there was one of the arcs that consisted of Jinwoo conquering the demon world, I guess. And after he conquered the demon world, he was supposed to receive the awards, but then he was called to the other side. And the princess of the other world was waiting for him at the place where he was going to get the rewards of the demon world. The the demon prince that he killed back then appeared almost at the end of the story again in one of the visions, that the original monarch of the death, the one Jim Wolves, is supposed to be uh, substituting. That guy he had the memories of having fought against this guy and having choked him, while the guy was actually threatening him from something that I don't remember exactly what he said. That guy appeared again, but Jinwoo never went back simply to get the rewards. Why is that? And we don't really know anything about the demon world beyond that, even though we know that they get that part too. There was the case of the heavens. What's the difference between the heavens and the other realms? And the realms of the dragons. Nothing about that. The realms of the beasts, the realms of the giants. What were the implications of having killed people from different realms? You see what I mean? It's a story that was too rushed, and it had, or it basically fed a lot on the popularity of the beginning, because it pushed everything with such energy. You were reading the very first 100 chapters with such energy that you were basically eating through the connection. If you had bad connection, you realize that it was frustrating because you couldn't see all the graphics and all the different things. And it had a good balance between the story reading and the action portrayed, because otherwise, why do you read a comic? You read a comic to check on action too, and it makes your imagination work in such way, especially the ones that is super beautifully drawn. I got more comments here. Let's say, Pedro, Fujimoto's work, amazing, Mister. You should also check one of the one shots. Goodbye, Eri, and look back from same author. Goodbye, Eri. It kind of rings a bell. Both feel very cinematic like experiences. Yeah. Speaking about cinematic experiences, Pedro, the Blue Period, that's incredible. The way he crafts scenes in top is top notch. So I would check him out for Yamamoto's work. I already have from you the one that you mentioned is, let's say, Goodbye Eri. I think I got it. Although yeah, they are depressing. Ah, it's that guy. Yeah, yeah. I possibly did that because I do that. I sometimes click on the author if I have read a story, a full story from them, and I get to see whatever they have written if they have in the web page that I use as my source of getting stories. Such was the case of a great one that I'm recommending you now. Okay, possibly you guys remember that I read a chapter back when you were in 10th grade. Imagine, guys. This was a story that was about a group of kids that um, they were left on an abandoned island. This abandoned island had no law, no police officer, no nothing. And in this abandoned island, the reason why they were left is because all of these kids were survivors, sorry, of attempting suicide. They all tried to kill themselves and survived. They were left in this island, and the reason why they were left was actually put on a poster, and that it reads that the government of Japan um, makes them relinquish their citizenship as they relinquished their lives when they attempted committing suicide, as they were in a list of people that were repeating because they kind of have like three strikes sort of deal. I don't know. That's part of the story. The thing is, in that story, the people that survived, let's say, they attempted suicide, they were drugged and left on the island. They wake up, and once they wake up, they realize that they're still alive. And not only that, they're in an abandoned island, but they realize that they can do two things, or they can kill themselves, or they can try living, which is obviously a great challenge. This is a great story, but at the same time, it's so dramatic that you need to have the moods, and I read it in moods.